In the heart of Nevada's barren desert, surrounded by salt flats and endless dust, there lies a cave that holds one of North America's most controversial mysteries. A mystery buried beneath layers of guano, bones, and ancient legends. The story of the red-haired Giants of Lovelock Cave. This isn't just another tale of lost civilizations or strange skeletons. It's a story that bridges myth and archaeology. A mystery that whispers about an ancient war between humans and a race of towering beings who may have once ruled this land long before recorded history. Some say it's all myth. Others believe it's the smoking gun that connects ancient America to the lost world of Atlantis. The cave itself lies about 20 miles south of Lovelock, Nevada, an unassuming hole carved into the rock, about 150 feet long and 35 feet wide. At first glance, it looks ordinary, like thousands of other caves scattered across the desert. But its discovery in the early 1900s would ignite one of the strangest archaeological controversies ever recorded in the United States. Before the scientists came, before the miners arrived with shovels and sacks, the story of the cave was already known, not through books or newspapers, but through legend. The northern Paiute people, the native inhabitants of this region, told stories passed down through generations about a race of giant red-haired cannibals called the Site-Ka, which roughly translates to Tula eaters. According to legend, these giants were a brutal people who waged war against the Paiute ancestors. They were taller than any man, with light skin and fiery hair, and they hunted the smaller tribes that lived around the Great Basin. The story goes that the Paiute eventually united against these giants. After years of conflict, the giants were driven into a cave. Yes, this cave. The Paiute trapped them inside, piled brush and branches at the entrance, and set it ablaze. Smoke filled the cavern, and the giants either suffocated or were burned alive. Their screams echoed across the desert as the entrance collapsed, sealing their fate forever. The legend says the last of the giants perished there, and the world forgot them. For centuries, the story remained nothing more than oral folklore, until the early 20th century, when a pair of guano miners, David Pugh and James Hart, stumbled upon the very same cave. At the time, guano, bat droppings, was valuable as fertilizer, and miners across Nevada were digging into caves for profit. In 1911, Pugh and Hart began excavating Lovelock Cave, removing thousands of pounds of guano. But what they found beneath the surface would turn their operation into something else entirely. Among the layers of droppings and debris, the miners uncovered ancient tools, woven baskets, bones, and strange artifacts, objects far older than anyone expected. But what shocked them most were the skulls, large, elongated, and unlike any they had ever seen. Some reports claimed they belonged to people nearly 8 to 10 feet tall. Word spread quickly, attracting archaeologists from the University of California and the Nevada Historical Society. The miners' claims of giant skeletons were met with skepticism, but the scientists were intrigued enough to launch official excavations in 1912 and again in 1924. The teams recovered over 10,000 artifacts, including stone tools, duck decoys, bone weapons, and remnants of human remains. But something strange happened, something that continues to fuel the conspiracy to this day. When the archaeologists took over, many of the most sensational discoveries, the alleged giant skeletons, disappeared. Some were reportedly sent to museums. Others were lost in transit. To this day, not a single confirmed giant skeleton from Lovelock Cave remains on public display. However, eyewitness accounts from the miners and early locals remain consistent. They spoke of massive skulls, bones longer than any normal human, and mummified remains with reddish hair still clinging to the scalp. Several miners even claimed to have handled skulls so large they could fit over their heads like helmets. The official narrative dismissed these stories as exaggerations, but the Paiute people, who had told the tale of the red-haired giants for generations, only smiled. For them, this was proof, not a discovery, but a confirmation of what they had always known. Even more puzzling, strands of reddish-brown hair were indeed found on some mummified remains excavated from the cave. Scientists insisted the coloration was due to chemical changes over time, that ancient hair often turns red as it decays. But locals weren't convinced. Why, they asked, would this cave, out of all places, match so perfectly with the ancient legend? Soon whispers began spreading beyond Nevada. Were these remains evidence of a lost race, a lost civilization erased from the pages of history? Some researchers began connecting the dots between the Lovelock Cave discovery and other mysterious findings around the world. Tales of giants, advanced prehistoric societies, and ancient cataclysms. As stories of the Lovelock Cave giants grew, so did the theories. Were the Site-Ka remnants of a lost Atlantean people, survivors of a great flood, or perhaps something not entirely human? The sands of Nevada keep their secrets well, but as the evidence piles up, one question refuses to fade. Who or what were the red-haired giants of Lovelock Cave?
To understand the mystery of Lovelock Cave, we must go deeper, beyond the bones, the baskets, and the artifacts. We must step into the realm where history blurs with legend. Because long before any miner ever set foot inside that cave, the story of the Site-Ka was already written into the soul of the land. For the northern Paiute people, these were not fairy tales. The giants were real, a terrifying memory of a time when monstrous beings roamed the desert valleys of Nevada. The Paiute described the Site-Ka as tall, powerful, and savage. They were said to stand between 8 and 12 feet in height, with light skin and blazing red hair, unlike any other tribe in the region. These beings were said to live by raiding villages, stealing food, and even eating their enemies. The Paiute legends describe them as cannibals with a hunger that could never be satisfied. According to oral traditions, the Site-Ka would weave boats from reeds and travel across ancient lakes that once filled Nevada's now dry basins. It's said that they came from across the waters, perhaps survivors of a flood, perhaps exiles from another land. And when they arrived, they brought terror with them. The Paiute fought back, uniting with neighboring tribes. For generations, they waged war against the giants. Spears, arrows, and fire became their weapons, until, finally, the last of the red-haired giants were cornered in a cave, Lovelock Cave. There, the tribes set the entrance ablaze, and smoke poured into the darkness until all that remained were silence and ash. When you compare this legend to what was later uncovered in that same cave, the ancient remains, the strange artifacts, and the reddish hair still clinging to some skulls, it becomes difficult to dismiss it all as coincidence. But here's where the mystery deepens. When the first scientific excavations began in the early 1900s, archaeologists did confirm that Lovelock Cave was occupied by humans thousands of years ago. Radiocarbon dating of artifacts suggests habitation as far back as 1500 BCE, nearly 3,500 years old. Yet among the artifacts, there were inconsistencies, items that didn't seem to fit the timeline or the known cultures of the region. Large sandals, woven for feet nearly 15 inches long, oversized tools, massive handprints impressed into clay, and in the words of early diggers, bones belonging to people much larger than modern humans. Though official records from the University of California described the remains as average-sized, multiple independent eyewitnesses, miners, museum workers, and local collectors spoke of something very different. Some claimed to have seen skulls twice the normal size, with jawbones large enough to fit over a normal man's face. A local Lovelock resident, Sarah Winnemucca Hopkins, the daughter of a Paiute chief, even wrote about the giants in her 1883 book, Life Among the Paiutes. She described the red-haired enemies of her ancestors, the Siteka, who were burned alive in a cave long ago. Her account was published decades before the cave's excavation ever took place, lending credibility to the legend's ancient roots. My people say there was a time when a race of giants lived in this land. They were tall, red-haired, and fierce. The tribes joined together and drove them into a cave, setting fire to the entrance. Sarah Winnemucca Hopkins, 1883. For many researchers, that's too much alignment to ignore. But if these beings were real, where did they come from? Some theories suggest the Siteka were a distinct tribe, possibly an offshoot of an early human culture now extinct. Others, however, reach far deeper into the unknown. A few independent historians have linked the Lovelock giants to Atlantean refugees, survivors of a cataclysm that destroyed a once great civilization. The theory goes like this. After the fall of Atlantis, survivors fled across the globe, bringing with them advanced knowledge, maritime skills, and a powerful physical presence. They could have reached the Americas thousands of years before Columbus, their descendants settling around the Great Basin. Over time, isolation and survival turned them into something fierce, monstrous, even cannibalistic. It sounds fantastical, but curiously, myths of red-haired giants exist not only in Nevada, but all across the world. The Guanches of the Canary Islands spoke of tall, fair-skinned ancestors who came from a sunken land. In South America, the Patagonians were described by early explorers as enormous red-haired people. Even in Ireland and the British Isles, myths tell of ancient giant builders, the Fomorians and Tuatha De Danann, who ruled before mankind. Could these stories share a common origin, a memory of an ancient lost race that spanned continents? Still, mainstream archaeology stands firm. No physical evidence of true giants has ever been authenticated. The skeletons reportedly found at Lovelock either were misplaced, misidentified, or destroyed. The largest confirmed skulls from the cave measured only slightly above normal size. But that hasn't stopped the speculation, because for every lost artifact, there is a witness who swears they saw something impossible. There are also rumors, never officially confirmed, that a few of the Lovelock skulls were once displayed at the Humboldt Museum in Winnemucca, Nevada. Photographs and old catalog notes allegedly describe large crania with reddish hair. But over the years, the bones vanished from public view, locked away or transferred without explanation. Was this simply a case of lost documentation? Or, as some believe, was there an intentional effort to suppress evidence that could rewrite human history? One thing is certain. Every time someone digs deeper into the story of Lovelock Cave, more questions emerge. Were the Siteka an ancient human tribe? Survivors of a forgotten world? Or perhaps remnants of something not entirely human? In the next part, we'll explore what archaeologists really found inside Lovelock Cave, and why those discoveries still haunt the records of American prehistory.
When the first official excavation of Lovelock Cave began in 1912, expectations were modest. Archaeologists hoped to find tools, baskets, and remnants of early Native American habitation, nothing more. But what they unearthed went far beyond simple artifacts. Over the course of several expeditions between 1912 and 1924, scientists from the University of California and the Nevada Historical Society recovered more than 10,000 objects, each one a puzzle piece from a forgotten chapter of human history. Among the discoveries were duck decoys, astonishingly well-crafted models made of reeds and feathers, considered some of the oldest in the world.
There were woven sandals, baskets, and weapons, tools of a people both resourceful and advanced. Yet, alongside these normal artifacts, there were things that defied explanation. Sandals that would have fit men well over 7 feet tall. Handprints pressed into the cave walls that dwarfed those of ordinary humans. Fragments of massive human bones, including femurs and skulls that miners swore were twice the normal size. But here's where things take a strange turn. In the early excavation reports, some of these findings were mentioned, but only in vague terms. Later, references to anything resembling giant remains seemed to vanish entirely. The original miners who claimed to have found enormous skeletons said the scientists dismissed their accounts, even ridiculed them. Yet according to several contemporary newspaper articles from that era, including reports in the Nevada Review-Miner and the Humboldt Star, local eyewitnesses described the discovery of mummified remains over 8 feet tall, with red hair still visible on their skulls. One 1911 report described the skeleton of a man measuring over 8 feet from head to toe, his hair a striking shade of red. The article claimed the body was found in a seated position within the cave. But today, those remains cannot be located in any public archive or museum. So what happened to them? Some say they were sent to the Smithsonian Institution, which according to conspiracy theorists has long been accused of disappearing anomalous giant skeletons discovered across North America. While the Smithsonian denies these claims, the pattern of lost evidence has only fueled the speculation. In the 1920s, archaeologist L. Loud of the University of California led further excavations and published a formal report. In his writings, he documented thousands of artifacts, but made little mention of anything extraordinary. However, in his private notes, later uncovered by researchers, Loud hinted at findings that suggested unusual stature among some individuals. Even more intriguing, an assistant involved in the dig, Robert F. Heiser, noted that several skulls had been remarkably large. Yet by the time the official academic papers were released, those details were omitted. To this day, the whereabouts of those bones remain a mystery. The Humboldt Museum in Winnemucca reportedly displayed some of the remains in the 1950s, including skulls with reddish hair. But by the late 1970s, the exhibit was quietly removed. Museum curators have since stated that the remains were either returned to local tribes for reburial or transferred to the University of Nevada, but no official record of the transfer has ever been verified. So for skeptics, this is just another case of legend blending with misinterpretation. They argue that early reports exaggerated the size of bones, and guano miners, with no scientific training, may have mistaken normal human remains for something extraordinary. But believers see a clear pattern. Every time evidence of giants surfaces, it mysteriously disappears into storage, never to be seen again. Why? Could it be that such discoveries threaten the established timeline of human history? Or perhaps they reveal something about our past that mainstream institutions aren't ready to face. There's also the question of DNA evidence. In the early 2000s, a small sample of human remains associated with the Lovelock site was tested. The results were inconclusive, showing typical Native American markers. But critics argue that those remains came from the uppermost, most recent layers of the cave, not the deepest strata where the alleged giant skeletons were found. If the true Psi K remains were ever tested, we simply don't know. And then there's the hair. Numerous accounts describe the mummified remains with reddish or auburn hair, distinct from the typical dark hair of the Paiute and surrounding tribes. Scientists claim the hair color could have changed due to oxidation over thousands of years, a natural process of pigmentation decay. Yet local tribal elders maintain that their ancestors always described the CTK as red-haired, centuries before science could explain it away. The deeper you go, the stranger it gets. Some fringe researchers have even compared the Lovelock findings to legends from other continents, stories of giants with light skin and red hair who appeared after cataclysmic floods. Could these remains belong to a global race that once inhabited Earth, one wiped out by a prehistoric disaster? Or are they simply a distorted reflection of humanity's oldest fear, the memory of being prey to something stronger, larger, and more brutal? Regardless of which version you believe, Lovelock Cave remains a riddle wrapped in dust. Its artifacts, now scattered between museums and private collections, tell a story of an advanced culture that existed in the Nevada desert thousands of years ago. But its missing bones whisper of something far more ancient. Perhaps the truth was never meant to be buried. Perhaps beneath the official reports, behind the missing evidence, and within the silence of the desert, the story of the red-haired giants still waits to be unearthed. Because Lovelock Cave might not just be an archaeological site, it might be a tomb, the final resting place of beings who once walked the earth when myths were still history.
Long before the miners unearthed bones in a dusty cave in Nevada, before the Paiute warriors sealed the fate of the red-haired giants, another story had already been written, one of a great civilization that vanished beneath the sea. The Greeks called it Atlantis, a vast empire said to possess technology and wisdom far beyond its time. According to Plato, Atlantis was destroyed in a single cataclysmic day and night, swallowed by the ocean and erased from memory. Yet fragments of its story endured, scattered across the myths of countless cultures. But what if Atlantis didn't vanish completely? What if some of its survivors escaped, journeying across oceans, carrying their knowledge and bloodlines to the far corners of the earth? It may sound like myth until you look closely at Lovelock Cave. Because hidden within the dust of Nevada's Great Basin, thousands of miles from any ocean, lie clues that strangely echo the Atlantean legend. Let's start with the red hair. Across the world, ancient texts and oral traditions speak of powerful, light-skinned, red-haired people who appeared after great floods. The Maya and Aztec called them the Viracochas, tall, bearded strangers who brought knowledge of agriculture and astronomy. In the Andes, the Aymara people said these same figures built megalithic temples long before the Incas. In Egypt, red-haired rulers like Set and Osiris were associated with divine power. And in Nevada, the Paiute described red-haired giants who came across the waters bringing war and destruction. Could all of these stories describe the same people, descendants of Atlantis? Some researchers think so. They point to geological evidence that around 12,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age, Earth experienced a sudden, massive cataclysm, floods, earthquakes, and rapid sea level rise that drowned entire coastal civilizations. This event aligns with Plato's timeline for the fall of Atlantis. If survivors fled inland, they would have followed rivers and ancient lakes, and Nevada, during that prehistoric era, looked very different from today's arid desert. The Great Basin was once home to Lake Lahontan, a vast inland sea stretching hundreds of miles. Its shores would have been lush, habitable, the perfect refuge for shipwrecked wanderers. So imagine this: a group of survivors, tall, powerful, red-haired people, wash ashore or migrate inland, settling along the fertile edges of Lake Lahontan. Over generations, their knowledge fades, their technology is lost. Isolation turns them from scholars to warriors, and their struggle for survival corrupts them. By the time the Paiute encounter them thousands of years later, the once great descendants of Atlantis have become the Sai Teka, violent, territorial, and feared. It's a theory that stretches the imagination, but the parallels are haunting. Ancient flood legends appear on every continent.
the Bible's Great Flood, the Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh, the Hopi stories of destruction and renewal, and the Maya flood of the four suns all describe global cataclysms followed by the rise of new people. Many of these new beings are described as giants or gods, sometimes both. If we follow that pattern, the red-haired giants of Lovelock Cave could represent one of those post-flood remnants, a surviving pocket of a forgotten global culture. Interestingly, artifacts from Lovelock Cave show remarkable craftsmanship, advanced weaving, fine tool-making, and complex basketry. These are not the works of primitive hunters. Whoever lived there had skill, artistry, and culture, hallmarks of a people who once knew more than their environment would suggest. Some researchers, like the late Dr. Carl Johan, proposed that the Lovelock people were part of a transoceanic migration, possibly connected to the seafaring cultures of the Pacific or even the Mediterranean. He argued that ancient maps, such as the Piri Reis map, suggest pre-Columbian contact between continents. If true, it could explain how remnants of Atlantean bloodlines and their distinctive red hair reached the Americas long before history books acknowledge it. Then there's the question of why the truth might have been buried. Modern science as we know it is built on the foundation of gradual progress, a story where humanity evolves from primitive tribes to modern civilization over tens of thousands of years. The existence of an advanced culture before 10,000 BCE, or of humans sharing the earth with giants, doesn't fit that narrative. If Lovelock Cave truly holds evidence of an Atlantean remnant, it would rewrite everything we know about the peopling of the Americas, and possibly the origins of civilization itself. Still, skeptics argue that connecting Atlantis to Lovelock Cave is pure speculation. They point out that no inscriptions, architecture, or advanced technology has ever been recovered there, only basic tools and organic remains. But believers counter that we've only uncovered a fraction of the truth. The majority of the cave remains unexcavated, its deeper layers sealed beneath rock and sediment. Could the missing pieces, perhaps the remains of the largest giants or evidence of foreign origin, still lie buried waiting to be found? It's a question that continues to draw researchers, explorers, and spiritual seekers to Nevada's deserts. They come looking not just for bones, but for proof that our ancestors were far older and far stranger than history dares to admit. Because if the Lovelock giants truly descended from Atlantis, then Atlantis didn't die. It moved across oceans, through deserts, and into the myths that still haunt us today. In the final part of this story, we'll confront the ultimate question. What does the legend of Lovelock Cave really mean for our understanding of human history? Were these giants flesh and blood, or symbols of something far more ancient and powerful?
The desert holds its secrets well. For thousands of years, Lovelock Cave has sat quietly under the Nevada sun, a silent witness to the passing of civilizations, a tomb for forgotten stories. Inside its dark chambers, the bones of mystery rest, waiting for someone brave enough to ask the forbidden question. What if the legends are true? When we gather all the evidence, the artifacts, the Paiute legends, the strange reports, and the missing skeletons, a haunting picture begins to form. A story of a race unlike any other, who may have once walked this land long before history began recording time. But who were they, really? Monsters? Misunderstood humans? Or relics of something far greater? A civilization erased by catastrophe, remembered only through whispers and myth? To answer that, we must explore the theories and decide which one fits the fragments we found. Theory 1. The Site Ka were an early human tribe.
This is the theory favored by mainstream archaeology. According to scientists, Lovelock Cave was home to a prehistoric people belonging to the northern Paiute ancestors, a culture of hunter-gatherers who lived near ancient Lake Lahontan around 1500 BCE. The supposed giant skeletons were likely misidentified, a combination of large but normal human bones, animal remains, and distorted folklore. The red hair, they say, is merely a byproduct of chemical decay. In this version, there were no giants, just human beings whose lives and deaths became exaggerated over centuries of storytelling. But this explanation doesn't account for everything. The massive sandals, the oversized tools, or the consistent reports from early miners and locals who swore they saw skeletons far too large to be ordinary. Theory 2. The giants were survivors of a lost civilization. This theory connects the Lovelock giants to the global flood myths and to Atlantis. If Atlantis truly fell 12,000 years ago, its survivors could have fled across the ocean to the Americas. In time, cut off from their homeland, they degenerated, losing their advanced knowledge and becoming the violent red-haired people described in Paiute legend. This would explain their unusual size, red hair, and distinct physical features. It also matches the global pattern of post-flood giant myths, from the Nephilim in the Bible to the Anunnaki of Sumer and the Titans of Greek lore. Each of these stories speaks of a powerful race destroyed by divine wrath or catastrophe, only fragments of their bloodline surviving in isolated regions. Could Lovelock Cave have been one of their last strongholds? If so, then Lovelock isn't just an archaeological site. It's a remnant of a forgotten epoch, a scar left behind by the collapse of a world far older than we've ever imagined. Theory 3. The forbidden knowledge theory. Some researchers go further, suggesting that evidence of ancient giants and advanced civilizations is intentionally suppressed. According to this view, institutions like the Smithsonian have quietly removed or concealed remains that challenge conventional history, not out of malice, but to preserve the accepted narrative of human evolution. If the public were to learn that humans once shared the Earth with another intelligent species, one perhaps stronger, taller, and technologically gifted, it could shake the very foundation of science and religion alike. It's an unsettling theory, but the disappearance of key artifacts, the vague museum records, and the absence of physical remains lend it a strange kind of weight. Could it be that Lovelock Cave is only one of many sites around the world whose true story has been buried, not by time, but by choice? The legacy of the giants. Whatever the truth, the legend of the Lovelock giants refuses to die. From archaeologists to adventurers, skeptics to believers, all are drawn to the cave, hoping to find the missing link between myth and history. The Paiute still remember the tale of the Site Ka, not as a fantasy, but as part of their ancestral memory. To them, the giants were real, fierce enemies whose screams once echoed through the desert night, and their story stands as both a warning and a reminder. Civilizations rise, fall, and are forgotten, but memory endures. Perhaps the greatest truth hidden within the Lovelock mystery isn't about giants or Atlantis at all. Perhaps it's about how easily the past can vanish, how history can be erased, rewritten, and replaced by silence. The desert doesn't lie, it only waits. And beneath its sands, in forgotten caves and dry lake beds, there may still rest the bones of those who came before us, tall, red-haired, and forever watching from the shadows of time. Maybe someday someone will dig deep enough to uncover what was lost, and when they do, the world will finally remember. Until then, the Giants of Lovelock Cave remain what they've always been, half myth, half memory, and wholly unknown.